In today's episode of our photography review show, we're gonna be looking at landscape, mixed team, nature, and wildlife photographers. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of our photography review show. I hope you had a great week, and I hope you're ready for more photography reviews. Now, if you've never been here before, my name is Jakub, and I'm a professional photographer based in West Sussex, England. For the past 9 or 10 months, I've been reviewing your photos, and I reviewed thousands of images from hundreds of photographers. Now, if you want to join us, all you need to do is to join our membership, Clever Photographer Plus. For a little monthly fee, you will get a full bundle of photography tools, including overlays, textures, presets, LUTs, and everything you can imagine. On the top of it, you will also get access to our Clever Photographer Academy and this photography review show. If you want to learn more about it, make sure you head to our website, cleverphotographer.com. Okay, so here we are in Lightroom CC, where we're gonna be doing the reviews. We have 12 photographers to go through, many of them landscape photographers, so let's start there. The first one is Caroline with one image, so let's jump straight to it. Starting by looking at the camera details, let's have a look if we have them, and we do. So first of all, we have a Canon 5D Mark IV, and the lens is 24-70, 2.8, and with the camera setting ISO 100, 70mm, f10, 1/20th of a second. So as a camera setting goes, I think it's spot on. ISO 100, brilliant, making sure that we have no additional noise. 70mm, obviously, as high as it goes on the lens, giving you quite nice view, which is a little bit zoomed in, not too wide, looking great. F10 is also great for this kind of scene, making sure that we have a sharpness all the way through, which is brilliant. So we get details everywhere, really nice. And then 1/20th of a second, giving us this beautiful defined sun. Altogether, it's looking great. I love the image, Caroline, and I think you did very well. So looking at the technical part and the sharpness, let's go to 100%. Obviously, the sharpness on the foreground is really good. There is a fair bit of noise, but that's usually maybe created by the camera or the lower light situation, so I'm not too worried about it. Again, the sun is really beautiful, the sky is beautiful, the details are really nicely done. So altogether, I think it's very good. I'm really impressed by the result, and it's a beautiful image. When it comes to composition, there is few things I really like here. I really like this leading line, giving us really nice flow for the image. I think that works very nicely. It's gentle, and I think it works very well. These flowers, the purple flowers as a foreground, also great idea. Then we have this kind of middle ground with which, again, the way they stored and laid out give us really nice depth here, which helps to create the depth in the overall image. I think that works very well too. And finally, the sun at the back as a background just really bring everything together, and I think it's a stunning picture. Just about third of a sky is always a good idea. It works really well on a landscape photography, so that's really well handled too. And altogether, there is so many things done right here that I'm really impressed, Caroline. Beautiful picture, well done, excellent job. Now, when it comes to post-processing, to finish it off, there isn't really much I would do here. I really like that the foreground is a little bit darker. That's what I like to do. I like to use little linear gradient usually, and just close it from here a little bit to add more focus in the center of the image. Also, keep an eye on this area here and maybe see if you could add a little bit of dehazing there. On the other side, the dehaze is quite natural there, so I'm not that it doesn't really bother me that much. So maybe just a little touch, trying to avoid any additional glow. You can then additionally play around with the white balance there. You can make it warmer or you can make it cooler and create a little bit more contrast. It really is completely up to you. After that, maybe a few more dodge and burns here and there, but in general, even if I wouldn't have touched the image, I think it's beautiful. It's stunning landscape and definitely something that would look brilliant printed on the wall. So Caroline, great job, excellent capture, well done. And I hope that you can share more images with us in the future. But most importantly, keep going out and keep shooting. Which brings us to next photographer, and that's David. David, I actually had to go back to previous episode and see if I haven't reviewed these images before, because I recognize the colors and the kind of setting and the long exposure. Obviously, that is definitely a good sign. I really like when I recognize photographers' handwork, when I can recognize the theme. So I couldn't find them, so I probably reviewed different images, but with very similar style. So we have two images, same building, different angles. So let's have a look at them. Both of them with the same camera, Nikon D810, and the lens on both was 17 to 35 millimeters. Quite nice lens, some nice range on it. I prefer 24 to 105. And then I have 12 to 24, just really nicely complement each other. But 17 to 35 seems to be good. It gives you the nice wide option as well as a little bit higher range there. F2.8 is great, so really nice and fast. And when we look at the camera settings, starting with this one, ISO 100, 17 millimeters, so really wide shot here, F11, perfect, and 3 seconds here. Now looking at it, the sharpness all the way through, I really enjoyed that. F11 again giving us the details all the way through, so very good there. 17 millimeters is a little bit wider than I would go, but it still look quite natural. I think really when you hit the 12, it's when the scene starting to do a little bit too, it's not really that natural. So 17 millimeter is good, and of course the 100 on ISO is really important as well. 3 seconds here. So looking at the water, and this is something I used to do a lot. I am a huge fan of long exposure, specifically for this type of scene, and I used to overdo it probably in some way, not overdo it, but I would really go for the long exposure, 10, 15, 20, 60 seconds, 2 minutes. And I realized after coming back to the images that sometimes it looks brilliant, and it's such a great element and method and technique to use. And sometimes it's too slow and it looks too unnatural. So looking at the water here, it almost looks like it's some kind of like a thick liquid coming through it. It doesn't look like water anymore. And this is where, from my experience, I would go for a little faster shutter speed, maybe try something like 1 second and get a little bit more texture in it and make it look a little bit more natural. That's for this one. On the other one, it looks much better. Maybe because from different angle, maybe because there is a lot of texture from the movement of the water. However, on this one, when you really look at it, it really looks like somebody just kind of poured something there and it's coming out. So I would have tried little faster shutter speed here just to gain some of the texture back. Now, I think one thing you've done really well here is the contrast between the long exposure and the other elements. This type of long exposure you're doing really works only if if you create a contrast between the smooth long exposure and the textured elements. So for example, like here, just to kind of explain you what I mean, is the water really smooth, kind of coming down next to it in a contrast, lots of sharpness and texture on the water. I think that's really cool. Then moving on this one, when it comes to the shooting, you are pretty much on the same setup here, so we don't have to go through it. As I say, because of the movement, because of the camera angle, I think it looks better on this one. And this is really kind of very individual artistic decision to make, what you prefer and what you like. So don't take it too seriously. It's just a suggestion. I think this picture looks great with the 3 second. And in overall, again, the contrast between the smoothness and the texture is great here. I really enjoy this moody light. I think that gives us really nice diffused light around, and then a little bit of fog altogether works really nicely. I really love the details that coming through the water as well. I think that helps, and in overall it's a lovely image. When it comes to composition between the two, this one, composition-wise, is probably a little bit stronger simply because of the leading line and the flow through the image. So there is more to it. I think the 3 here and 3 here creates a really nice frame. So from the kind of composition rules, this one is probably a little stronger, where on this one we kind of have a little bit of unbalance here, obviously the water leaving this way, but you have this really strong frame here and not on the other side. Also, maybe since this one is really like your main subject here, it's a shame that it's covered with the trees. It happens, it's just kind of mentioning few things to keep an eye on and what would be ideal here. However, I like both of them. You see how one technically is better, on the other side the other one maybe composition is better. It's just different things, looking at the different ideas. Now when it comes to post-processing, I actually love both of them. Now this one is a little bit sharper and crispier. I really like this one because it's a little bit more natural, I think. The colors and everything, especially the white balance, looks great here. On this one, looking at it, I think we're getting some kind of tint there, and to check it we can go into our color here and maybe use the eyedrop thing and just click on the water, and that gives us this super yellow. So that's never a good thing. So let's have a look if we get a little bit more white somewhere here, maybe here. So I usually use the water for the white balance, but it seems like maybe there is way too much blue at the back. So here maybe be a little bit closer, maybe not that much yellow, maybe just a little bit less. Let's have a look before and after. And I think now when I look at the before, you can see how much blue is in it and how much green, where here I think it's a little bit more natural. Now looking at your image, I don't think that you had that much yellow, so we can still tune it down a little bit, maybe just somewhere around here, and get something like this, which I think is a little bit more closer to each other. Other than that, what I would do, maybe add a little bit of vignette just to close it even more. And what you could do, you could maybe use a little bit of dodge and burning there. On this one, similarly, I think it's really nice. A little bit of vignette again is always a good idea. You could also use local adjustment with the linear gradient and close it from here and see if that helps. Other than that, what I like to do with long exposure is also to use a brush with a little bit of extra exposure and open shadows and just paint on these areas just to make them even more visible. So altogether, David, I love the images, great job. I really love the mood you captured. Just a few tweaks on ideas for the future, but nothing major. They are both great. They could be both printed and framed, and lovely, lovely images. So thank you for sharing them with us. If you have more, make sure you share them in the future. Which brings us to Greg. Greg, 2 train captures here. So let's have a look at them. So 2 images. So let's jump straight to it and look at the camera settings. Here we go, starting with the image number 1, Nikon D7500 with a 80-400mm lens, and from the camera settings here, ISO 200, 116mm, f8, and 1/180th of a second. So looking at the image, ISO 200, yeah, I don't think that there is generally huge amount of noise here anyway, so that's all good. 116, so really punched in close shot. Oh, where did we go? F8, yeah, giving us lovely sharpness all the way through, and 180-second, giving us this lovely steam coming from the train as well. Altogether, lovely, lovely image. I think the camera setting is spot on. The sharpness is great. So look at the guy. That's like a photo bomb here. Yeah, the details, the smoke, the fog, the light is a little harsher, but nothing crazy. And I think altogether it's great. Now looking at this one, that's a different capture. In the evening, looking at the camera here, it's a Nikon D5300, 16-80mm on your lens. And from camera settings, ISO 100, spot on there, 35mm on the lens, f8, 8 seconds. So I'm assuming that the train was stopping, so it wasn't moving. So easier this way because you can then use the longer exposure, which is great. And you can also use the 100 ISO, which really avoid any noise, which is brilliant. I love this image. Really sharp, really crisp, really, really very well done. Now, I think the sharpness is good. I don't know. I think everything is good. When it comes to composition wise, I think it's a brilliant image. All I wish was that there was a little bit more space under the train here, just a little bit more. I'm I don't know, it's something I always done. It's a little bit keeping an eye on the edges of the image. Also, maybe from my experience, I do lots of framing and sending images, and I know that when I'm too close, sometimes I run into the problems with obviously the picture then disappear behind the frame or mount. So just gonna keep an eye on it and try to always have a little bit of extra space, especially when it's your main subject. Other than that, the composition is great. The train is right there, obviously with this water reservoir or whatever it is. It works lovely. I really like the overall feel with the light there, with the warmth, with the blue hour. Just works very, very well. On this one, as a kind of zoom in, I think it's brilliant. I loved how the light is on with the flags, with all the smoke, with the movement. I think it's great. I really, really enjoyed this image. I really like that it's zoomed in. I think that is, yeah, it's all about the frame. So I don't mind that there is not that much space in front of it. I think it's very storytelling. I think the subject is clear. There's lots happening, and I think people would enjoy this. So altogether, both of them as a composition goes, very well done, Greg. When it comes to post-processing, I would probably just bring the exposure down a little bit on this one, and maybe bring down the highlights just a little bit here. I think it's a little bit too bright for me. Other than that, I think it's all good. When a color, maybe add a little bit of extra vibrance, just make it a little bit more punchy. And if we would want to, we could maybe close the image a little further with the use of linear gradient. So you could paint one from the bottom, for example, with the minus exposure, and maybe one from the top as well with the minus exposure. And that way we get a little bit more focus on the main subject. On this one, actually nothing to add. I think it's brilliant. I think it's very well done. The white balance is nice. Highlights, shadows works very well here. It's all just very well done. The brightness is good. So altogether, Greg, brilliant 2 pictures. Thank you for sharing them with us. And if you have more, make sure you send them over. Which brings us to header. Header 1 image here. So let's have a look at it. Header. Can we? Yes. So we have a Sony 7 Mark III with the 24-105 lens, which I'm super happy to see because I use it all the time. I love this lens. ISO 800, 24mm f8, 1/250th of a second. Now, let's have a look. Header. The image is lovely. Now, when it comes to your camera setting, it's almost kind of daylight. So I wonder if there was any way you could bring the ISO down a little bit more. 800 seems to be really high and it seems really bright. So I wonder if you pushed maybe a little bit the exposure or how you end up with a bright image like this while keeping the ISO on 800. Now, the benefit of this camera is that at 800 it's really not that noisy, so it's not really that big problem. Maybe a little bit on the forest here, but the sky looks quite good and the boats looks good as well. So altogether, even though it's 800, I think it's looking good. 24mm I think is good. That's very natural wide lens here. F8, yeah, giving us the sharpness pretty much all the way through, and 1/250th of a second is a good shutter speed to keep the details in the sky, and obviously depending on the light to see what the exposure is. So just keep an eye on the ISO. Don't go too much higher, otherwise you will start to get the noise into your images. When it comes to composition, I think it's a very lovely idea. Now you kind of need to think of what exactly you're trying to show. What is the overall idea? Obviously the boats, that works very well. In that case, I would probably try to have them a little bit more centered and make the composition a little more balanced to do something like this. In that case, for next time, maybe also what you could do is to bring the f-stop a little bit more down to somewhere like f4, focus on the boat, and then get the background even a little bit more blurrier or softer. So that way we get a little bit more depth. So what I'm trying to say is that you need to choose a subject and then show the viewer that that's the subject. So in our case, if it's the boats, one technique you could use is the depth of field. So focus on the boats and make everything else a little softer. So the human eyes immediately recognize that, yes, it's the boat we're talking about. If it's the port, then there is not enough of the port. So I think the boats are probably the main subjects. They are beautiful. I think the contrast of the colors with the rest of the image works really well. I really like the contrast of the colors of having this warm brown wood with the rest of the blue and green kind of moody feel. I think that works really well. When it brings us to the post-processing, what I would do here, I would bring the exposure even more down, bring the highlights down as well. Then I would go into my selective masking, use a linear gradient from the top, and bring the exposure down to add a little bit more drama to the sky. And then equally one more linear gradient from the bottom, and create something like this, again with minus exposure, and just kind of close it from the bottom of the image as well. Why are we doing it? Because human eyes are automatically attracted by the brightest and whitest parts of the image. Then I would use radial gradient and very gently point it at the boat with a little bit of extra exposure and using it almost like a flashlight. So basically pointing at the boat and again giving the human eyes an idea that those are my main subjects. So there you have it. After that, you can just apply very simple vignette to it. Something like this. And that's about it. This is where I would go. Before, after, just a little bit more local adjustments, a little bit more focus on the main subject, and you end up with something really cool. Heather, thank you so much for sharing your image with us. It's a pleasure to review it. And if you have more, make sure you send them over. Which brings us to John. John Lister. We have more images from Scotland, am I right? Difficult to say. I would say somewhere maybe Scotland, Ireland. Still looking great. I love the colors in the trees. Is it that time already or is it from last year? I wonder. 15th of May. I wonder where did you capture this on 15th of May? Still beautiful images, both of them. Let's jump straight to it. Starting with this one, it's a Nikon Z6 with a Nikkor 24-70. From your camera settings, ISO 140, 24mm, f5.6, 1/100th of a second. So let's talk about it. ISO 140, spot on. 24mm, quite good. Yeah, as I say, for this type of landscape, I usually try to stick to that. I never really go wider because I think it really distorts the image after. So 24. Way to go. F5.6 is a little bit lower. For this type of scene, I would generally like to stay 7.1 and above. However, it doesn't really look that bad. So maybe to control the shutter speed and ISO, you had to go a little lower. So that's fine. 1/100th of a second. Still give you nice sharp look. With lots of details, with the fog and clouds, and with nice light on a tree. Now, that's for the camera settings. I think you spot on here, nothing really to add to it. The sharpness is good, the light is very interesting, and I love the clouds on a top. Which brings us to this lovely house here. Do we have same camera, same lens? From the camera setting here, this is ISO 280, 24mm, f9, 1/100th of a second. So similarly to the previous picture, the camera setting is kind of spot on, higher ISO, but then also the f-stop on f9, which is good. Altogether, I think it's lovely. What does it say? It doesn't say. I thought it's going to tell us where we are maybe, but Mount Soho. So anyway, moving on. The sharpness is good, the light is very lovely, and again, the colors are absolutely stunning there. Now, moving on to composition. Obviously, normally I would say, oh, the house is great, and it's a lovely little cottage, and it works well. But then I see the trees, and I'm thinking, oh, I would much rather see the trees or more of the trees. So I'm wondering if there was a way to maybe incorporate a little bit more of the trees into the scene, because I think that would really make it even more interesting. Altogether, I think it's still lovely. The cottage is nice. Shame for the one person. I would probably wish they're not there. They're kind of hidden in darkness. So just if they wouldn't be there at all, I think that would be preferable. Other than that, it's a beautiful, beautiful picture. The composition and the subject is clear, and with the addition of the background, it's cool. Now, talking about this image, first, I think I'm not a big fan of this tree here, so I wish it wouldn't be there. Then we have a little bit of it here as well, that's not a problem, and here. However, it's kind of really difficult to try to see what you're trying to show me. Is it the reflection, but then it's not really the greatest. I wonder if you could have gone a little lower. Then these mountains, you see only very little of them. So even though there is lots of little things there happening, the reflection and the fog and the big mountains, I think nothing really is that dominant. Again, similar like the previous photographer, to say what is it exactly you're trying to show me. And because my eyes are starting to be a little bit, confused to what to look for, then I try to pay attention to things like these cut tree and so on. So even though I get the idea what you were having, I don't think it's the strongest composition I ever seen from you, simply because the foreground is a little bit distracting and there is no clear vision of what you're trying to show. And that's about it. When it comes to post-processing, nothing too much to add here. I think it's quite nice, clean, crisp. The white balance is lovely. The fog is nicely done, so it's not just one big blob. It's nicely done. So altogether on this one, it's good. On this one, not much to add here. I think the colors are brilliant. The editing is very gentle. I would probably try to remove this person and maybe try to replace it with something, but that's me personally. So it's more artistic decision. And I think rather than post-processing, which is very nice here, and yes, you could add vignette and so on. What I would try to for next time look for is to be maybe a little bit more zoomed out, to give a little bit more space around it. And if not, with building like this, I quite often enjoy being really, especially when you have something so similar on each side, that gives you a really nice balance. I would try to shoot it head on, because I think then it creates really nice balanced composition on each side, and it's really worth to spend a little bit of time to get that in camera. John, thank you so much for sharing your image with us. You take care and send us more images if you can in the future. Which brings us to Laurie. Laurie, 2 images. Let's have a look at them. Oh, I thought that's a lizard here. And it's not a lizard, it's a tree. So let's go for it. Starting with this image right here, looking at the camera settings. Canon 5D Mark IV with 24 to 105 millimeters. And from camera setting, ISO 100, 40 millimeters, f8, 1/50th of a second. So I think the camera setting is spot on. ISO 100, as you know, always starting point. 40 millimeters giving you nice zoom. 8 on f-stop gives us the nice sharpness all the way. And my God, there is a sharpness all the way. Sometimes I'm impressed what the camera is able to capture. And 1/50th of a second is just on the edge of what you can handheld. So well done for that. Which brings us to the picture next to it. Canon 5D Mark IV, same lens, 24 to 105 with ISO 100, 82 millimeters, f8, 1/40th of a second. So everything good. F8, yeah, all good. I think perhaps, and I don't want to be wrong, maybe you done a little bit of sky enhancement here, but still, I think it works very nicely together and it's looking great. So, camera setting good, details are there too. So are on this one. So let's talk about composition. I love this texture here. However, first thing first, I'm looking at it and I think it's tilting a little bit, Laurie. So I wish the horizon would be a little more straight. Now, of course, that if we make it straight, we're going to lose lots of the sky. So I completely understand why you wouldn't. But ideally, you would be getting something like this at least, because then it would be, maybe that's a bit too much. Let's go back, maybe something like this. So then it's a little bit more natural. You could also, let's reset this and go into the geometry and use the auto and see what that will do. Yeah, then we could get something like this, which looks the most natural, I think. Okay, we have less sky, but I think it looks more like something you maybe thought about a little more. So as a composition goes, so first thing first, straight horizon. Second thing, we need to somehow do some local adjustments so not everything look the same. There's so much texture that your eyes get confused and tired of it. So obviously few things you could do to it here. You could do a little bit of vignette and close it, something like this. Then you could use some local adjustments like brushing first, little bit of let's see, burning, so adding contrast to the areas where there is a contrast or wherever you want it, something like this. Then maybe making the background a little bit darker. Then we can adjust the strength of this and do something like this. Then another brush with increased exposure this time and painting over areas where we want to actually bring the attention to. So something like this. After this, we can enhance it even further with the use of contrast. And I think to make it a little more natural, I would go into the effects and bring down the clarity a little bit, add a little bit of glow to it. So it looks more natural. So before, after, something I would do, maybe not -48, maybe 24. Looking at this one, actually, I don't have that much to add here. I think as a technical, it's very well captured. Composition, it's leaning to, but it's not a big deal. I think the tree helps us because it looks like that's how it is. And human eyes would never know. So where here it's obvious, you have your horizon, you can't really trick that. Here, you would never know. So very well done there. I think it's looking good. The composition, obviously, it's all about this ridge with the sky behind. So that looks great as well. The tree works, so very good. Interesting light here as well. So altogether, only when it comes to post-processing, maybe again, a little more vignette and maybe a little more contrast. Yeah, something like this. Again, in effects, a little bit of minus on clarity and get something like this. If you would want to, you could again use linear gradient from the bottom here and do minus exposure and create something like this. So there you have it, Laurie. 2 images. This is what I would do. This is what I think. If you have more images, make sure you send them to us in the future. Until next time, take care. Which brings us to last landscape photographer, my friend Sorin. Sorin, whoa, beautiful, beautiful sunset here with a lovely valley here, epic sky. Let's go for it. Starting by looking at the camera details. Nikon Z9 with a Nikkor 24-70 and from your camera settings, ISO 64, 25mm f9, 1/500th of a second. Camera, brilliant. As a camera setting goes, yeah, as low as possible, 25mm giving you this lovely natural result. F9 sharpness all the way through. So lovely. And 1/500th of a second giving us this beautiful sky with the sunset light glow. Everything is happening here. It's stunning. When it comes to composition, you know I'm gonna say I love this. Maybe I would reduce or remove a little bit of the sky. I'd quite like to use like a 1/3. So if we want to say keep the same crop, we look it and then just bring it down a little bit to something like this. Because I think the thirds, when you can use them, they are really helpful. So we have 1/3 of the ground, 2/3 of the sky. The sky definitely is worth the celebrating. So I think that looks good. And that's what I would do with the composition. The road really helps here, giving us the guidance through. One thing, when it comes to composition, I would close the image even further from the top. Simply, again, bringing more attention towards the center of the image. The dodge and burn here created with the actual light works very well. The depth is great here. The composition is lovely. The light is great. The colors are great as well. Altogether, Sorin, not much to add here. I'm wondering, you must know that when you send picture like this, I'm gonna love it because it's beautiful. The result is great. You should be really proud of this one. Beautiful sunset, beautiful capture. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. So it's time to leave landscape photographers and move to mixed team photography. We have 2, Blake and Zdenek. Blake, let's have a look at it. We have 2 images from you. So let's jump straight to it. We have this one and this one. This one is really cool. That's very, very smart. I love the frame in frame. I think this effect always looks great. So well done. Starting with this one, it's more your phone capture really than anything else. I understand that it maybe has some kind of memory value for you, but normally, it's really difficult to say what it is. It's kind of half cut as well. There's lots happening there. The light isn't greatest, so you have your kind of bright areas here and darker areas here. So it's tricky to say, well, let's have a look at it still. Obviously, this is captured with Panasonic. I wonder if this is a phone or if it's a camera. I'm not 100% sure. 12 to 60 millimeters, maybe it's a camera. ISO 200, so that's quite good. It's always good to try to keep the ISO as low as possible to make sure that we don't introduce any additional digital noise. 60 millimeters, yeah, so nice zoom here. F6.3, it's kind of one between. When you go higher, you make sure everything is in focus. When you go lower, you can create a little bit more depth. Depending on what the subject was, if it was this lion or whatever it is, I would probably have gone even lower and maybe try to try to create more depth between the lion and the rest of the image. 1/250th of a second, giving us quite nice sharpness and light. So as a camera setting goes, there isn't really anything wrong here. The sharpness is good, the light is interesting. However, I would prefer to have a brightness on the main subject rather than outside of it. Where it brings us to this image. This is definitely with iPhone 12 mini. Lovely capture. Now, obviously, when it comes to phones, the camera setting is a little bit different than your usual DSLRs or mirrorless. So I don't worry too much about it. ISO 50, trying to keep the noise down. 4.2 millimeters on your lens, 1.6 on f-stop, and 1/1200 I mean, as a HDR scene with the details inside and out, it's brilliant. Epic, epic. Composition wise, I love it. I love it because this is totally like a picture I would create. I really like it. It's very storytelling, the storm and everything behind with this darkness. It's beautiful, Blake. You should be really happy about this one. It's a lovely idea and it's well executed. When it comes to this one, like, you know, when you take this one, this is something I would definitely capture and I could even sell because it's cool. Where this one is something I would capture when I'm on holidays, you know, just kind of walking around taking pictures, and I would probably never use it. It's just not that interesting. And when it comes to camera technique and photography technique, this is quite tricky, or it's not something that everybody would be able to pull off, where this one everybody could take. So there's a big difference between the two images. And this is maybe why, because I see this, then I'm more like, okay, this is not really that wow. However, when it comes to post-processing, I would definitely crop it. And this is assuming that the main subject is the lion. So then I would probably go for something like this and try to really kind of focus on it. Can't do really much more than that. You could add some vignette to it to add more focus on the lion and take it from there. Where on this one, I think it's really nicely done. What you could do is you could maybe make it even more straight, and you can do that in Lightroom in geometry. Use something like auto, and then it kind of makes it even more straight. When it comes to cropping, you're already in a center anyway, so that's good. I really enjoyed this silhouette feel of the image, the fact that this is almost dark. I think that works really, really well. And altogether, Blake, this is one of my favorite pictures of this week. So thank you very much for sharing it with us. Well done. Thank you for sending it over. And if you have more pictures, make sure you send them in the future. Which brings us to Zdenek and his attempts on product and still life photography. Obviously, I'm assuming the weather isn't really great in South Africa still. So we have this macro capture of the flower and this pot. Zdenek, let's have a look at it. I hope you're staying safe. I hope you're keeping well. I hope that you will get better weather soon. Looking at this image right here, I love it. Love the white. I think so clean. I remember a picture we were looking at not long time ago with the kind of dirt and stuff. This is so much more cleaner. Also, the contrast of this kind of ginger rusty orange with the white works brilliant. I love the shadows. I love the level of details on the thing. This is totally like a capture you could use for advertisement. So spot on. Well done there. We can still look at it, but there is not much I will tell you on this one. It was captured with Canon M6, 15 to 45 millimeters. ISO 320, no problem with, especially when you're doing this kind of studio captures. 36 millimeters on lens, f11, 1/60th of a second. Looks all good to me when you zoom in. There's no noise visible. The texture is well captured. The light is great, very well diffused. I love that there is not really these sharp highlights, except maybe just a bit here, but it's not really a big deal. The rest is great. Love it, love it. On this one, Canon 77D 24-105 f3.5. Now from the camera setting, ISO 100, 77mm, f5.6, 1/250th of a second. Now, if I would have seen this one first, I would probably tell you, oh great, it's a lovely capture. Where I look at this one and the quality of the capture here, which is brilliant, crisp, clear, great light and everything. And then you go to this one and you already see. First, I think it's touch soft. When I look at it, you can see that it's not perfect. It's moving just a little bit. So that would be my very first thing. After that, the light really isn't great. You get this really strong light here, maybe a little bit here, and then everything else is in a shadow. So I think one or the other. Either you bring the flower out and get the harsh light on all of it, so it looks like that's what you wanted, or you try to diffuse all of it, maybe put it in a more diffuse conditions or something like that. This just, you have these shadows here and that this is kind of hidden. But I think my biggest thing is the sharpness, Zdenek. It really looks soft. Now, I think to some degree you could probably try and save it in something like sharpness AI, but for a photographer like you, I would probably try to reshoot it again. I think I'm trying to find a spot. Sometimes camera has a spot where it captured it sharp, but I can't really find it. It seems like very slight movement or something must have happened there. Still, as a composition goes, I think it's really lovely. I love the shape of the flowers. I love these two being there as the main subject. I think that works really well. But it's just more the technical part where I would be looking at and thinking, okay, maybe something to work on. Also, I think it's really, really contrasty. You get from this bright sunny thing all the way to black. I'm just not sure if it's working. Composition wise on this is great. It all fits there. This really helps. I think it really push the picture together because it gives us nice texture. It kind of introduces the image, makes it all more alive and makes it a little bit more than just a still life photo. So altogether, brilliant. Post-processing, editing, brilliant as well. Really nice brightness. I think it just all works very well together, Zdenek. So well done. On this one, I would more focus on the technical part rather than the post-processing. What I say, you could try to run it through like a sharpening software and see if that would help. But I think there is a point when then it's just easier to reshoot the image. So Zdenek, thank you so much for sharing your pictures with us. It's always a pleasure to see them. If you have more, send them over. I am away now for 4 weeks. I'm going to France first and then to Greece for 3 weeks. I'm running a workshop there. And then I'll be back and we're gonna continue. So if you want, send the pictures over. I will look at them and then I will run next show beginning of October, I believe. Moving on to next photographer, Evgeniy. Oh, this is beautiful. Well done. Oh, I love this image. Very, very nice. And this one, beautiful. Lots of details here as well. Lovely lights. Really make me think of late summer. So very, very cool. But this one, love it. Let's have a look at it. Evgeniy, starting with this image here, Pentax K100D Super, camera settings, ISO 200, 85 millimeters, 1/90th of a second. What a beautiful picture. I really, really like it. I love the level of details, love the composition, love the light, love the colors, love the sharpness, love everything about it. It's really, really, really cool. It almost looks like your fine art picture with a lovely texture, softness, blur. Beautiful. Now, when we talk about this one, still very lovely, maybe a little harsher light here, but the colors are nice, the details are good. Again, ISO 200, 210 millimeters, f9.5 and 1/500th of a second on the lens. I love the fact that these are in focus, the rest is very gradually getting softer, so I think that works very well. The light is quite nice. Yes, it's a little stronger, but still, it's a lovely capture. And altogether, I think it's lovely. As a composition goes, the depth works very well here. The contrast of the different colors works nicely too. The contrast of the sharpness works nicely. I think the fact that the whole scene is kind of built from the fruit works very nicely too. So altogether, lovely image. And this one and the composition, I will not be able to tell you much to it, Evgeniy. I think it's stunning. Stunning. You have the kind of landing zone with the flower, with this main thing in front. Then the background with the soft similar flower again, filling the rest of the frame is just beautiful. Beautiful. And even for the post-processing, I will not tell you to do anything with it because this is ready to be printed and put on a wall. Love this image. Well done. Excellent. As a post-processing here, not much to add. You could do a little more vignette if you would want to, but not really. I think it's really lovely. The white balance is great. The highlights and shadows works very well here. Maybe I would just remove in Photoshop this and be done with it, so then it doesn't take too much attention away. And the rest is brilliant. So really impressed, Evgeniy. Stunning picture. One of the nicest flower images I've seen for a very long time. So thank you for sharing it with us. You stay safe, take care. And if you have more images, send them to us for next episode. Which brings us to Ken. Ken, 2 images here. Starting with this lovely, what is it, deer? I would like to say deer, but it's hard to say. Well, animals anyway. Ken, let's have a look at it. Nikon Coolpix P1000, ISO 720, 167 millimeters, f5.6, 1/125th of a second. So, Ken, looking at it, as a camera settings, ISO is a little bit higher. This is why you're getting this kind of artifacts around. Again, looking more like a watercolor. So something to kind of keep an eye on. 167 millimeters, yeah, lovely zoom. It's looking good. They're lovely animals. f5.6, giving us nice depth, so that's good. 125th second on the shutter speed. I would go faster probably next time, just to make sure that you keep everything sharp. I understand that when you go faster, maybe you have to make some other adjustments to the camera, but still, it's a lovely picture, and probably the biggest thing I would focus on is the ISO. Well, talking about this one, Ken, it's a lovely bird, but it really is on the edge of watercolor. And I don't know if it's because of the zoom or if it's maybe some denoising you done to it, but this is something where, it really needs more details, I think. ISO 140 is good. 252 millimeter, obviously you're really zoomed in, but if you would print this, it wouldn't really be visible too much. f5.6 is a good 1/500th of a second, giving us more of a sharpness there, but the overall look is really like watercolor. As a composition goes, it's very lovely. Obviously the bird with the fish in his mouth looking great, but really something to work on when it comes to sharpness and more details. Talking about this one, as a composition is lovely. The little one with the mom looks great. Obviously the contrast of the green and the animals is really lovely as well. So altogether nicely done. What I would do to it, maybe just bring the exposure down a little, then go into something like HSL. Let's see. And bring down the saturation of the green a little bit, and in luminance maybe make the green a little darker. Just take away a little bit of attention from the green. So something like this. Then additional vignette and done with the picture. Not much we can do here. I think the first thing you need to focus on is details. So altogether, lovely picture. Really enjoy this one. This one may be still to work on. Ken, thank you so much for sharing it with us. You stay safe, take care, and if you have more images, make sure you send them for the future episodes. Keri, 2 images. Let's have a look at it. And these, I believe, are raw files, if I am right. Yes, anyway, Keri, let's jump to it. We have 2 images here. Again, I would say it's deers. 1, 2. This one, Panasonic. Now, is it mobile phone? I would like to say so. Maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, ISO 100, 215 millimeters, f5.9, 1/125th of a second. So ISO 100, spot on. 215 millimeters, really zoom in. f5.9. Now, I wonder if that's the reason why you have the flowers more sharper than the actual animals. I think maybe the camera was focusing more on the green, and then with f5.9, with that kind of zoom, gives you this depth. 1/125th of a second. I would go a little faster next time, especially when you're talking moving animals. I like to stick to somewhere around 1/250th, just to be on a safe side. So that's for the future. And as I say, in first distance, the things I see is that the green is sharper than the animals. So that's something you need to look at for the future. Now, this is beautiful. So ISO 80 here, 215. So again, zoom in, f5.9. So pretty much a similar setting, just smaller ISO. So again, I would go probably faster on the shutter speed. You are a little bit more sharper here. So that's good. You can see how the background is much more soft now, but it's also in more distance than on the other picture. Still lovely image. What I would do here when it comes to composition, I would focus on the main subject here. So I would, you already started a little bit. I wonder if we would just do something like this. But then obviously we still have deers here. So maybe, yeah. Let's have a look. Maybe something like this. Take it from there. Yeah, so we have our main subject here. Now, again, coming there, let's have a look. So when it comes to post-processing on this one, bring the highlights down. In the effect, definitely push the dehaze and see if that's going to help. So I think something like this really takes away this haze. After that, coming back to the image, open the shadows, double check my whites, double check my blacks, and push a little bit more contrast. For my white balance, let's have a look. What does auto give us? 2 blue, 2 blue. So maybe just a little bit of magenta just to remove the green tint from everything. Extra vibrance, remove a little bit of saturation. In effect, I would bring the clarity down to add a little bit of natural feel and recover some of it with a texture slider. After that, we can bring the vignette down and get something like this. Let's have a look. Before and after, and maybe something like this. What you could do a little bit of local adjustment with a linear gradient, minus exposure, and add even more attention towards the animal. Similar from the top there, just close it a little bit more and get something like this. Again, before and after. Now this one, because of the sharpness, I'm not really going to edit it because I think technically you need to start a little bit differently on that. It's still a lovely picture. I think first thing you would do, you would kind of try to maybe make it more straight. So that would be my first thing. And then continue just like on the other image. Try to focus on the main subject, which are the deers. Close it from the top and the bottom. Do some dehazing and play with it. Keri, thank you so much for sharing your images with us. It was a pleasure to review them for you. If you have more, make sure you share them with us in the future. And thank you very much everyone for joining us for the Photographe review show. We will be taking 4 weeks break now. I'm heading away. We are going to France and Greece. I will be doing some videos from there, hopefully on our YouTube channel if I have a time for it. If not, we take a little bit of time off as well, just to kind of recharge and recover and get ready for the autumn season. So the next episode will be somewhere around 5th of October. I will keep you posted on all of that. So thank you so much. If you want to join us for that, if you're already part of our Clever Photographer Academy, just follow the post there. Otherwise, check out our Clever Photographer Plus membership. It's a great deal. For a little fee, you will get access to Photography Review Show and many other benefits. For today, thank you very much for watching. My name was Jakub, and I can't wait to see you in the future videos.